Okay, now here's my more interesting thing. Okay, before I actually get started on series and sequencing, right? This is, you'll need a pen out if you haven't got one. Okay. I'm at kind of a unique spot. We as a class actually are at kind of a unique spot in terms of where we are in teaching the course. And what I mean is, because I started doing videos almost exactly a year ago. Okay, actually just a bit over a year ago. And because I taught Year 12 this year, right, and therefore started their HSC course in Term 4 last year, right, I've actually come full circle in terms of all the topics that I've gone through, okay? So the astute among you will have noticed that, you know, series and sequences being our next topic, I actually already have a playlist of series and sequence videos, like 20-something videos or something like that, and all the other topics there because I taught them to Year 12 last year and this year, right? So I'm at a unique spot in that I can do something, or we as a class can do something different. Okay, now let me try and explain. What's a normal, how do we normally do maths? How does it normally work? You come in, I wait for everyone to sort of arrive, you sort of get set up, all that kind of thing, and then I'll give you like a short, sometimes short, explanation of like a concept or a technique, that kind of thing, right? Maybe 5 to 10 plus minutes, right? And then what happens? By the time you've got a bit of time to do some questions, some exercises, and then the bell goes, and then in theory, you go home and you finish that, and that's how we learn maths, right? How we're supposed to learn maths, anyway, okay? But there are two glaring problems with that way of doing maths, even though it's basically the way that every high school teacher does it. Number one, the explaining part, right, is really hard to do well. And here's what I mean. If I'm actually like, if I know what I'm talking about, right, then when I'm explaining, hopefully for most of you, it'll be at a pace which is kind of about right. And you'll be like, okay, this is making sense, and I'm getting a new idea, and the questions are sort of appropriate to my level of understanding, okay, if I'm doing my job well. However, even if I'm doing it as well as I can, just looking at this class, right, we have a broad range of skills. So there will always be some of you who are kind of like, I know this already, or come on, can you hurry up and get to the interesting part? And there will also be people who are like, I don't understand anything of what he's saying right now. Like I know what all of the words individually mean, and then you put it together, and I'm like, I don't know.
That's a proper sentence.
And I'm just not getting any of it, but everyone else seems to be quiet and seems to be getting it, so I'm just gonna shut up and try and work it out later, right? And so we stream classes, like we grade you guys, and we put you in, M2 or M4 or M6 or whatever, in order to try and gather together the people who are like similar ability. But you guys can see in this class we've got a broad spectrum, right? And by the way, not only, like I know which of you are the people who are kind of like, oh, come on, get on with it, and I don't understand what's going on. Not just because I know you guys, I've been teaching for a while, but I can see it in your eyes. Like there's this sort of glazed over look that you get where you're like, yes, I've done this topic, or this topic is completely meaningless to me. So I can tell, and it's sort of sad for me, not just like, I'm a failure as a teacher, but like it's I feel bad for you guys being in that position, because I remember what it's like being in that position. And it's not a good place to be, either of them. There's the first problem. The second problem is, with regard to homework, right? I said in theory, number one, it just doesn't happen, right? Like half the time it doesn't happen, because I know how busy you guys are. You've got a million other subjects and commitments that you have to do. And even though like the idea is, yeah, every night I do this and this and this, I feel like the reality is probably more like maybe twice a week you get in a good session on one particular thing, right? And then a couple of days will pass and you just got to do the other stuff, and then you're like, oh crap, I better go back and do some English or do some maths or whatever, okay? And not only that, even when you're doing it, you correct me if I'm wrong, but when I'm doing an exercise and trying to work something out, that's when I need help. That's when I need someone to talk to, because I'm actually doing the question and I'm like, oh, now I know that I don't get this. Whereas when I'm sitting, listening to someone explaining, right, even if I'm sort of at the right pace, it feels like, yeah, I understand this. This all makes sense, right? And then you try and do it, and that's when you realize you need help, right? Which is why most of us don't ask questions when an explanation is going, because when someone's telling you something, it sort of makes sense, because it comes from someone who seems like convinced that it all fits together. So you're like, yeah, I kind of get it. It's only when you do the exercise you realize you need help, right? but you're doing the exercise at home and you're mostly detached from, well, you're detached from me, you might message a friend or something like that, but it's not the same as actually sitting with someone and trying to work it out. Okay. So there's those two problems. Now, here's the idea, right? What if we take the normal way of doing things, right? Explain at school, do exercises and stuff at home, and turn it around the other way, okay? So what you do is, at home, you look at all the explanations and you try and wrap your head around the concept, right? And then at school, you come and do the exercises, okay? Now, because of that kind of switching idea, teachers and educators and fancy people who write research articles about this kind of thing, they call this the flipped classroom. So it's turning it upside down, if that makes sense, okay? It might. Anyway, so my question to you guys is, we're now in the position where we could give this a go. Some people actually, in the US, this is a really big thing, and what teachers might actually do is they'll spend all summer, which is in July, which is weird, but anyway, they'll spend all summer alone, looking at a video camera and like doing all these explanations in preparation for their classes coming back, and then when they're actually around, then they watch it at home and all that kind of thing. And I thought about that idea, and I'm like, I don't have, the time or the inclination to do that on my own, and I don't have a life, that kind of thing. So, okay, that's why I did it, what I was doing in class. But now, because we've come full circle, we can actually do this, right? So here's what I want you to write down. Here's my thinking process, and I want you to help me through it, okay? I'm trying to think about whether we should do an experiment, right? And give this a go, okay? Now, just on the blank side of the paper, okay? Follow instructions, come at you. On the blank side of the paper, here's what I want you to do. Just leave it where it is. I want you to draw two columns, okay? The two columns are pros and cons, okay? Pros and cons, right? Now, I've done some thinking and I've done some reading about this. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to walk you through some of the pros and cons which I know about this idea, okay? But I need your help in, you've got a different perspective and different ideas. I want you to help me think of more. So I'm just going to get you started, okay? And then I'll get you to turn over the piece of paper and fill out the rest, okay? So, what are some advantages to this idea? The most obvious one is, remember how I told you the whole, the explanation part is not for the right pace for everyone, right? So if you're watching a video, unlike me, you can pause and play and rewind and replay as much as you like when you're watching a video, right? So that's kind of like, okay, I know what this is about, I'm just going to skip the next 10 minutes, okay? Or, I watch this, makes no sense to me, but I feel bad to ask a question in class. So you can just go back and watch it as many times as you like, right? Or you're like, this was 3 months ago and I can't remember, so I can go back, okay? So there's a big advantage, okay? I also said, there's a problem of when you're doing the exercise, that's when you need help, right? Well, if we spend the majority of our time in class actually doing exercises, I'm always accessible to you. You can always ask me questions. You guys are accessible to each other, and that's just sort of, it frees up that time, if that makes sense, okay? So it puts the time where you need the most actual person-to-person help when there are people around, okay? Another advantage. If we're not spending, a lot of this time that we spend in class is just you listening to me, right? Which is, not necessarily the best way to do things. So if we push that to another time, right, then it frees us up in class for me to do consultation, for us to do more kinds of examples, right? So I might run through, here's one kind of question, let's do 5 examples, right? But there might be 15 examples that are really worth looking at, but I just don't want to talk at you that long, and we just don't have the time in class physically to do it. Particularly with some of the more challenging examples, right? So it frees us up to do more of those kinds of things. Yeah.
So you'll still be recording more challenging questions?
Well, that's part of what I'm trying to work out. I'd assume yes, but I'll get onto that when I talk about disadvantages. A third advantage that I've been thinking about for a long time, and I've wanted to do for a while, is it frees us up in class for you guys to actually get up and explain stuff. Okay, now let me preface this by saying, at university, right? At university, you go to lectures and you go to tutorials. Okay, so it's kind of like splitting apart the explaining part and the exercise part into two, right? Now, lectures, you get the professor or whatever, and they're explaining all the stuff, and then tutorials, you often have to, as groups, you have to work out stuff and explain it and do presentations and so on. I always hated it in tutorials where like you got 13 weeks of class and like the first week is introduction and then 12 weeks are, okay, I'm gonna pair you guys up and you guys do the presentation. I was always like, are you kidding me? I'm paying like $30,000 for this and you're making me do that. This is rubbish. Like, what am I paying for? You're paying me, I'm paying you to explain to you that this just feels dumb. And I'm like, and you know, I always felt like the tutors half the time were making us do this because they didn't know what to say. So I'm like, yeah, I'll make those guys do it, and then I can get out of the work. But, hopefully, you guys know me well enough, and I've proved, like in person and through the videos, that I'm not doing this because I don't actually know the material. But I honestly believe, right, as a teacher, I don't know, it's a funny thing. I don't know if you've ever contemplated this, but I always used to think, you know, how hard can it be to be a high school teacher? Because at least in our country, everyone's been to high school, right? So you know all the stuff, so you just have to get up and talk about it, right? But any of you guys who ever tried to explain something to someone else know that that's a complete lie. Because you need to know something, number one, very thoroughly. Number two, in a deeper way to actually explain to someone effectively than if you just want to know it enough to answer a question, okay? So I actually think I'm doing you guys a big favor by forcing you to get up and try and explain a concept because you will understand it much better yourself, okay? It's an idea, right? So there are a bunch of pros, okay? They're just the ones that have come off the top of my head, okay? Cons. There are disadvantages, okay? One of the things I've hated as a teacher is often we get told, oh, you know, here's this new educational idea and it's going to solve all your problems and your students will all get A+, whatever. And it's always exaggerations. There's always like a kind of give and take that they always tell you the give, but they never tell you the take. And you're like, actually, there's costs to this. So, example, watching a video, even if it's me standing up and explaining something, is not actually the same as me standing up and explaining to you because I'm not making eye contact with you. You can't ask me questions if you want to. One of the things that people from other classes have mentioned, particularly the 4-unit guys, because they don't tend to get 3-unit material explained to them because they're too busy learning the 4-unit stuff, is they've said, because I actually sat down with someone after sport and they were asking me questions and I was talking to them and they're like, this is really weird because when you watch your video, you have to get used to not asking questions because you can't ask questions, right? So even though sort of we don't tend to make a habit of that, it's kind of nice to be able to just stick up your hand and say, wait, this explanation makes no sense to me, right? And it's a problem in an explanation because suppose 15-minute video, right? And the thing you don't get is 60 seconds in, right? And the other 14 minutes depend on you understanding that first minute. And you're like, but I don't get it. And I can't stop someone and say, wait, can you just say that a different way? So those 14 minutes and whatever subsequently, I'm stuck, okay? So that's a disadvantage. There's just going to be technology issues that come up, like, you know, I went over my quota or just YouTube's playing up today or something like that. And I feel very, very frustrated if the reason you can't explain something and do something which everyone has to be able to do is because technology is playing up on it, okay? Now, I think that's most of what I was going to say. One other disadvantage is that when I'm talking to you, even if I'm really boring, I'm kind of the only thing in the room. Whereas if you're watching YouTube, right?
Yeah.
There's plenty of other things there. There's Facebook is open. All of the related videos are there on the side. Like, some of them are really weird, by the way. But anyway, so you know, a computer is a it's a pro-distraction environment, right? It's designed for that very purpose, to be able to multitask and do many things at the same time, okay? Which is not necessarily conducive to actually learning from what you're watching. So it's not without its disadvantages, okay? So that's what I've come up with. Now, I only wanted you to write them down so that when you turn over and fill it out, you don't say the same things that I've said and can't remember what was the thing I said like 6 minutes ago. So please turn over the page now. And I'd like you to spend 5 or 6 minutes thinking and filling this out as honestly as you can because I want to know your thoughts on this. Okay, yeah?
Isn't that sort of the point that if we don't get something we come to school and ask to get more time?
Well, yeah, I guess so. But I'm just trying to temper it against the fact that when I'm explaining to you in class, you really can ask a question, right? And you can ask it right then, right? And also as a teacher, like one of the things that I'll do, on any given concept, I'll know 4 or 5 different ways to explain it, right? But I'll only pick out 1 or 2 unless someone's having trouble, and then I can pick out 3, 4, or 5, and that might be the one that makes it click for you, right? So I can do that better in person. I can engage better, if that makes sense.
Is the answer to 2B?
The answer is what you think is. Now, by the way, well, you know, I just thought I'd start off gently. Now, by the way, the answer to question 3 actually, sort of thing. The answer to question 3 is critically important to me because there's always a big difference between what you might think is going to happen and then what actually happens, right? So I want you to answer as honestly as you can. Like, yeah, I don't know, like yes or no or whatever. I want you to try and predict, and then I want to see how that, like if we do this, like if all of your feedback is overwhelmingly negative, then I will not do it because I know I can teach normally and it'll go okay, right? Whereas this is kind of going out on a limb. So I won't, but if we do try it, I will assess it at the end with a similar kind of form, so yeah.